Good morning. Welcome to some more yoga with me, Emily. I say good morning. I always forget. You can watch these anytime. I usually record them in the morning if that's not a giveaway already. I thought today we would work through flexion and extension of the spine. So lots of forward folds, really getting into how to do a forward fold properly, quote unquote. And then also the opposite of the forward fold, which is heart openers, right? Because it's nice to work flexion and extension at the same time, so you're not always just rounding, but you're also not always just opening and getting the arch through the spine. Today, if you have a strap, it might come in useful. If you don't have a strap, then a belt or, I don't know, rubber bands? No, I'm just joking. If you don't have a strap or a belt, it's not a big deal. You don't have to use one. I'll give you variations for if you don't have one. So let's start in a tall seat. You can be cross-legged if you wish. You could be on your shins, kneeling. You could have your legs outstretched. I really like sitting up on a block. I'm sitting up on one of these guys. Helps me get a little bit of a pelvic tilt and releases the hip flexors so that I don't have to strain to be here. I could sit here quite easily for as long as I need to. I invite you to close your eyes, unless that triggers something or you feel your eyelids flickering. And then for a few breaths, inhale deeply through your nose. And exhale, sigh. And breath away. A couple more. And continue breathing however you need to, whether it's in and out through your nose or your mouth. Notice how your breath is flowing. And it's completely perfect wherever you are, nothing to fix or change. Just notice. With every inhale, imagine your spine lengthening from your tailbone all the way up to the crown of your head. With each exhale, a gentle softening of the front body. So you're not rigid, but you are long. Inhale to lengthen, and exhale, soften. And I'd like you to start to picture your spine if you can. Maybe even including the pelvis at the bottom, so those sort of butterfly wing shapes of the pelvis, and in the middle where they join the sacrum, the fused lumbar vertebrae. And then up from the sacrum is the other lumbar vertebrae and the gentle forward curve that they have. From the lumbar, we go into the thoracic vertebrae, so the ones where we have ribs, whether they're attached or they're floating in the front. And they curve back slightly. And then from the thoracic vertebrae up to the cervical vertebrae, the ones in the neck that curve forward again slightly. And we might as well add the skull as well. Balancing at the top, supported by this long column, but a column of pieces, not one single unit. And off that column, we have the ribs wrapping from the back around to the front, giving your heart, your lungs a big hug. And then lower down, the abdominal muscles supporting the other organs of the body. Last few breaths here. And you might even keep your eyes closed here as you inhale. Start to lift your chest up to the sky, little squeeze of the shoulder blades. And then exhale, round through the spine. You might pull through those shoulder blades. Inhale to lift through the heart. And exhale, round. We're moving through seated cat and cow, or flexion and extension of the spine. You might rock forward and back on the sit bone as you do this, and it could be really slow and unctuous. Some of you who really like the Kundalini background might do sharp and fiery like bellows. The last couple of breaths, just moving how you need to. And on your next inhale, come back to the tall seat. Gently flick your eyelids open if they're not already. And welcome. Make your way onto hands and knees. So setting up with knees underneath hips, toes can be tucked or untucked behind you, hands outer shoulder width apart or wider. Give yourself lots of space. There's no point practicing yoga with your hands close together. You're going to eventually, maybe not right away, but eventually you'll develop impingement of the shoulder joint. So you want the outer edge of the shoulder in line with the middle of your wrist, right straight down, and then the V of your peace fingers also pointing to the middle of the wrist. And then as you inhale, lift the tailbone, hollow through the lower back, wrap the shoulder blades toward each other, cow pose. And then exhale, round through the spine. Really press it up to the sky, into cat. And then inhale slowly, dip the belly, and exhale round. So even here, can you imagine all those vertebrae in the spine moving almost independently, or at least affecting and affected by the ones on either side? So they're moving like beads on a string. And again, less like a single unit, so you're no longer a column. You've got all these interconnected pieces, and as always, if there's any other movement that would feel really good here, feel free to add in wag of the tail from side to side, or barrel rolls through the chest, through the torso, the shoulders, going wherever feels really good for you. Last couple of breaths here. And on your next exhale or inhale, whatever works better for you, just gently come back to center. Little draw of belly button to spine. And then we're going to bring a block or some sort of pillow underneath your left knee. If you have it, if you don't, you can double up the mat if you feel like you need a little bit more cushioning. And then start to reach the right toes behind you. Some of you might choose to stay here with the toes on the floor today. And that's a really great place to stay. You're still really active through that right leg, toes pressing into the floor, heel reaching back. Some of you might choose to de-weight that leg, and it takes a little bit more work, really planting the right hands to the floor. Make sure the hip isn't opening up to the side though, so you wrap that right hip toward the floor. Some of you might even add the left arm here. I'm going to go sideways because I keep feeling like I'm going to knock over my books. So reaching that left arm, right leg, couple more breaths here. So the muscles that work in flexion and extension of the spine are the flexors and the extensors, and they're both getting quite a bit of work here. Now as you exhale, curl into a little ball. Bring elbow, knee, and nose toward each other. Inhale, lift back up, and exhale, curl. Last breath here. And then release. Come back down, hands and knees. Little wiggle, little shake, whatever you need to do. I'll set up on the opposite side. Again, if you're using the block, then you might bring it underneath your right knee for a cushion or even a folded up towel. Hands and knees. Step the left leg back. Again, this is a really fantastic place to stay without rounding too much through the spine or dipping, a little draw of belly button to spine. Plant your left hand. Maybe you start to pick that left leg up behind you. Sometimes what happens is we lift the heel too high, and then we have to go into extension of the spine, right? The belly starts to dip. So bring the heel down in line with the hip or even lower. Maybe you reach the right arm up, thumb to the sky, palm to the left. Few more breaths here. Press the lower ribs up to the sky so that you're not dipping through the belly. Surprisingly challenging work. Last breath. And then exhale, round through the spine. Elbow, knee, nose. Inhale, lift back up. Here you can go into a bit of extension if you wish, or even hyperextension. Last couple. And then come back, hands and knees. Little wiggle, little shake. Take your knees wide, mat width apart or wider. Toes touching, maybe at the back edge of the mat. Send the hips back and walk your upper body toward the floor. Child's pose. If it feels better for you to have the knees together, then by all means go there. If the hips are really quite lifted up from the heels, sometimes it feels good to bring a pillow or even a block between the heels and the bum, and it gives you a little bit of lift wherever you need to go. A few more breaths in child's pose. And staying in child's pose, walk your upper body over to the left. And then you might be over on the wood or the floor or the carpet. And then now start to puff up the right ribs. You can clamp down on top of one hand with the other for more traction. And really start to get into the side body. With every exhale, think of lengthening the right sit bone back toward the heels. And then inhale through center. And then over to the opposite side, over to the right side. Now breathing into the left side of the body. As deep or as gentle of a side stretch as you need. Keep lengthening that left sit bone back toward your heels. Super normal for the head or the hips to lift a little bit when you do these side stretches. And then inhale, come back to center. Press yourself back up again. Hands and knees. Little wiggle, little shake. And then let's step to the top edge of the mat. Standing forward fold. Here we go. Now, I know a lot of people when they're starting yoga and standing forward fold, it looks something like this, right? And they think, how am I ever going to get my hands toward the floor? Not that that's necessarily a goal, but I know for a lot of people when you're starting out, it feels like you should be there. And it's the problem here is that you're getting only flexion through the spine. What you need to add is this flexion at the hips, right? I'm only going to get so far if I keep the hips in neutral or even an extension. You have to send the sit bones back, right? And there we go. Now we've got the hip flexion, then the spine can just naturally drape toward the floor. Some days we feel like we need a little bit more support, so maybe you rest your elbows on your knees. Some days we feel like we need more, and we grab opposite elbows with hands, getting more traction through the spine. And then the other thing you don't want to do here is to hyperextend the knees. Mine naturally do that. I practiced like that for many, many years and gave me quite a few instabilities in my legs, in my joints, sort of chronic pain things. So bend the knees. I highly recommend that. If your arms are crossed, take the opposite crossing. And then nod your head yes. Shake your head no. Let your head hang heavy, neck long, so you're more likely looking between your legs than you are at the floor. And then bring your fingertips to your shins or the earth. Inhale, lift up partway. Exhale, let it all go. Couple more. And then bend your knees, tuck your chin into your chest slowly. Start to roll up to standing. I want you to go really, really slow. You can bounce. You can sway a little bit side to side. Just see if there's any kind of niggling tightness that you want to get into. And then eventually, maybe you come all the way up. You can always pause and take a really long time to come up. Maybe a couple loops of your shoulders, up, back, and down. Little noodle, release whatever you need to release. Shake it out. Whew, standing. All right, feet hip width apart or so. Actually, let's do this. If you're able to bounce, then just bounce. Just jumping, really small hops. Nothing too crazy. If it's not good on your joints to have this impact, then just keep your feet on the floor and bounce. We're going to do a few more. Then just let everything go. So you're not really concentrating on what you're doing. And eventually, I'm going to ask you to stop. And when you stop, don't move your feet. Okay? So, 3, 2, 1, stop. Woo! Tingly vibrations right through the body. But look down. See where your feet have landed. That's pretty close to hip distance apart. So where your femurs naturally hang from your hip sockets. I find a lot of people take too wide or too narrow. So this is going to be the most stable position for you. Little draw of belly button to spine. Shoulders on your back. On your inhale, sit into chair pose. Hips back. Knees bent. Right? So you don't sit into a chair like this. Right, that's like a bar stool. Send the hips back into the tailbone down just to feel belly button engaged towards spine, knees out. And then bring your arms up to cactus. Okay. Inhale here. As you exhale, tuck the tailbone under, round through your spine. Give an imaginary friend a big bear hug. And then inhale, lift back up. Exhale, round. Couple more, right? Flexion and extension of the spine in the sagittal plane. Last couple. On your next exhale, release all the way down. Forward fold, right? Finding that hip hinge. Couple breaths here. Fingertips to shins. Inhale, lift up partway. Exhale, let it go. Cool. You might want to turn sideways on your mat. And we're going to take a wide leg forward fold here. Since we're already in a forward fold, maybe just heel and toe the feet out wider, or maybe you're still facing the top edge of your mat and you just come out onto the floor. This is a really great place to bring something underneath your hands, right? Depending on the length of your legs, to your arms, to your torso. Sometimes this isn't a position where it's super easy to get your hands to the floor, and that's okay. Not a big deal. Now, the other thing to check in with is make sure that your toes are slightly turned in. You want your heels wider than your toes, and that's going to protect your ankle and knee joints a little bit better. And then the last thing you don't want to do is think of pressing the feet away. You want to hug the feet back toward the center line. So you get a little bit more activation here. You're not just shoving the weight of your body into your joints. Again, trust me, this is going to be a lot easier on your body in the long run. From here, send the sit bones back a little bit to find that hip hinge even more. Maybe you let the torso and the spine hang forward. Some of you might choose to take a different hand position, maybe to the toes or the ankles. Maybe walk the palms back behind you. Keep hugging the legs toward each other. Right? Maybe you're up on blocks or two. It doesn't really matter. It's wherever you need to be. One last thing to check in with is try rocking your weight forward and back. So you have a tendency, I find, to hang out in our heels especially if we're pushing the feet away from each other rather than hugging them toward each other. So send the weight forward a little bit more. Last couple of breaths here. And then bring your left hand to the floor, sort of underneath your face, and then inhale, peel the right arm up to the sky, little twist, and then exhale, right hand down. Inhale, peel the left arm up, and exhale down. Once more each side. And then rest in the middle. Bring your hands to the floor underneath your shoulders or on blocks. Inhale, lift up partway. Exhale, let it all go. So this is less about a stretch and just more about equalizing blood pressure because we've been in a forward fold for a long time. So these little partway lifts just helps get that blood pressure back to normal. You have a couple options here. First one is to heel into the feet together and then come up, or maybe a little micro bend in the knees, hands to hips, and then inhale, stand all the way up. From there, heel into the feet in, like a hoe down. I'm not sure why I did those arms. Shake it out a little bit. And then come on back to the top edge of your mat. Little hug of the legs toward each other. Inhale, sweep the arms up to the sky. And exhale, forward fold. Inhale, little partway lift. Exhale, fold. On your inhale, step your right leg back. Maybe release the knee to the floor, maybe to a chip foam block. If you have blocks for underneath your hands, then great. You can use them. If not, come on up. Hug the legs toward each other. Squeeze the bum like crazy on that back leg. Belly button to spine. Shift the hips forward. And then bring the arms to cactus. Again. So really grounding through that front heel to activate the glutes to stabilize. Squeeze the bum on the back leg. Get deeper into the hip flexors. Inhale here. As you exhale, round through the spine. Again, a big bear hug. Inhale, lift back up. Some of you might choose to charge the back leg towards straight if you wish. Coming into high lunge. Last breath here, exhale. Inhale, pause. Okay. Bring your right hands to the floor or to a block. Inhale, reach the left arm up. And maybe you draw windmills. Wrap that bottom shoulder onto your back. Maybe you just pause in this twist. And slowly, gently release. As you exhale, shift your hips back, extending through the front leg. Half splits. Hands can be on hips, on blocks, or on the floor. So with half splits, you don't want to go all the way back because I'm not getting anything through my hamstrings here. Right? You want to come hips up over top of that back knee. Right? Little micro bend on that front knee. And then send the hips back slightly. So you've got that hip hinge. And it's less about sending the hips back as it is about just making sure that you're folding at the hips instead of just trying to round through the spine here. Right? There's a big difference between this and that. Wrap the right hip forward. Draw the left hip back. You can even bring your thumb on that left hip and wrap it back. Flare the toes on the front foot. Maybe think of pressing through the big toe mound on that left toe, left big toe. Last couple of breaths here. Gently bend into the front knee and just step forward, standing forward fold. Little wiggle, little sway or bounce. Then fingertips to shins. Inhale, lift up partway. Exhale, fold. On your inhale, step your left leg back. Release the back knee to the floor or your block or your pillow, whatever you're using. Back out of the stretch a little bit. Hug the legs toward each other. Squeeze the bum. Belly button to spine. Then shift forward. Back toes can be tucked. Probably tucked actually rather than untucked. Will give you a little bit more stability once we start to move. Make sure the hips are really wrapping forward on one side, back on the other. Squeeze the bum, bring the arms to cactus. Now again, this is a great place if you want to tuck the toes and lift the back knee up, you're welcome to. Otherwise, stay with me. Exhale, round through the spine. Inhale, back up. And exhale, round. 2 more. Gently release your left hand to the floor. And then wrap the shoulder onto the back. Inhale. Peel the right arm up to the sky. You could be on a hand. You could be on fist. You could be on fingertips. And maybe you move here, getting a little bit through the shoulders. As I say, this is all about flexion, extension of the spine, but you can see we're getting some twists, we're getting some hips. Last couple breaths. And slowly inhale, unwind. Slowly shift your hips back as you extend through the front leg. Again, hands could be on hips, on blocks, or on the floor. Send the hips back slightly, but not all the way back. Right, so it's just finding that hip hinge. Wrap the left hip forward. Draw the right hip back. Flare the toes on the front foot. As always, a little micro bend on that front knee. Don't lock it out. Excuse me. Last couple breaths here. And then inhale, rock forward, back into the front knee. Step into standing forward fold. And release, shake it out a little bit. For 3 breaths, inhale, lift up part way. Exhale, let it go. 2 more. And come down, maybe hands and knees first. And then shift your hips to the side, swing your legs forward, come into a seated position. This is where you, if you have the strap or anything like that, go ahead and grab it. If you don't have it, again, it's not a big deal. I want to show you a couple things about seated forward folds. So we usually think we have to have the legs straight. I don't think that's a good idea. I think a micro bend. I can usually fit my fists behind my knees, and that gives me enough play. And then for a lot of people, just sitting here, depending on the shape of your body, the tightness of your muscles, it's really awkward. And you're kind of rounding through the spine, or you really have to struggle to stay up. That is where I recommend coming up onto something, a rolled up towel, a chip foam block. What this does is you can see, even with, right, for people for whom it's easy to sit, right, you get that little tilt of the pelvis, and it wants to shift you forward. So that when you start to come forward on a long line, you can, and it's not just being like, I'm never going to get forward, right? Same thing as when we are standing. So you want to find that pelvic tilt, which is what the block helps with. Okay, spine long. Little bend in the knees. And here is where, if you have the strap, you might bring it to the balls of the feet, right? Not on the arches, not on the toes, just on the balls of the feet. And then maybe the feet come closer together, maybe they stay wide, it doesn't particularly matter. Little bend in the knees. And then you can just use the weight of your torso to maybe walk the hands further down the straps. Some of you might not even need a strap, maybe you grab onto the balls of the feet. I feel like I get different feedback though, personally, from when I use a strap and when I don't. I get more lengthening through the spine, right? You can see that. So a few more breaths. Spine long, right? Long, 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 long. So we're just doing a hip hinge. And now if you want to, start to round forward. Then you can let go of the strap if that feels good for you. Head heavy. If those knees really want to hyperextend, then bring a fist behind them. Last couple breaths here. And slowly inch your way back out of it. Bring your hands behind you, bend your knees. Little windshield wiper of the legs. And one last thing before we come down to the floor, I could probably do another whole half hour on flexion and extension. Feet planted, hands behind you, fingertips pointing back. We're not coming into reverse tabletop, but we are going to lift the hips a little bit. So shift your hips forward and down. And then wrap the shoulder blades toward each other. Lift through the heart. Press through those index finger knuckle mounds a little bit more. Wrap the upper arm bones toward each other. Feel that beautiful release through the chest, the shoulders, possibly even down the upper arms, the biceps toward the elbows. And then gently release, shake it out a little bit. Some of you might hold on to the knees as you slowly roll down to the earth, or you can do a Pilates roll down if you wish, or just come on down to the floor, however feels good for you. Once you're there, hug your knees into your chest, little rock from side to side. And then take your right arm out to the side. You might shift your hips right to start with. Exhale, lower the knees to the left. You can do a 2-knee twist where the legs are stacked. You could take a single leg twist or cross legs, whatever feels good for you here. And if there's a lot of space between the knees, if you have to struggle, then you can bring a block between the knees or underneath the bottom knee, and that gives you a lot more support. And then look in the opposite direction of your legs. Last couple of breaths here. And then inhale, back to center, reset your spine and pelvis. Maybe you shift it over to the left a little bit. Exhale, knees to the right. And then just because you did one variation on one side doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing on the opposite side, even with twists. So go where you need to go. Sometimes feels quite nice to bring one hand to the top knee or thigh, just to give you a little bit more support, but also a bit more traction. And then maybe you look along the opposite arm or the opposite direction of the knees. Last couple breaths here. And slowly inhale, come back to center. One last thing before the rest. Draw the knees into the chest. Little rock from side to side. Maybe you take them wider. This is a great place to stay, or if you want to, kick your feet to the sky for happy baby. You might just grab the backs of the thighs or somewhere on the legs, the ankles, or the feet. It's generally easier if your arms are in between the knees rather than trying the outside. And then when you're ready, release to the floor for your rest. You can just rest with the knees bent, hugging in toward each other, or maybe the legs are straight. You could rest on your side in seated meditation, in child's pose, wherever you need to go. And then for 3 breaths, inhale deeply through your nose. Exhale, sigh. A breath. A couple more. Stay here longer if you can. 5 minutes even, maybe even 10. Thank you so much for joining me today. Namaste.